Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily here on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. Before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video. For a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. I should also mention, I apologize for not being here with you yesterday. Had a little bit of a stomach bug over the weekend, so without going into gory detail, of course, because no one wants to hear about that. Like I've said to you in the past, I was not feeling 100%, not feeling like I could give my all to a show as I needed to rest, recuperate, recover, rehydrate, and all of the above along the way. So I wanted to just take that moment. And of course, it's an important message, right? Just if you're not feeling great, you're allowed to take a pause and make sure that you're feeling better. I am feeling much better now, not that you asked, but so it goes. Anyway, back into it with our New York Mets, who are, don't look now, on a bit of a roll. They take the first game against the San Diego Padres last night, 2-1. In what was a weird baseball game. We'll talk a lot about it coming up here in just a moment. But don't look now, the Mets have won 4 games in a row. They are 10-3 in their last 13 since the trade deadline. They sell off all of these pieces, and they're playing better baseball, and their team batting average, which was in the 230s for the entire season over this course of time since the trade deadline, is like 274. They're getting production, and they're getting productivity all over the lineup. They're getting great pitching in the starting rotation and in the bullpen, and when one area of the team falters, the other parts of the team are picking them up. So when the starters aren't going deep or the starters don't have everything, the defense is coming to play. The offense is doing just enough when it needs to. Sometimes the offense is going on an absolute roll, bailing out the starting pitching. The bullpen has been absolutely nails outside of a couple of appearances here or there. Anyway, this has turned into quite the run from the New York Mets. And look, I am not buying into the hype as of yet. The Mets have buried themselves, and the likelihood of this team going on any kind of run to make the playoffs is unfathomable, just short of unfathomable. However, with the win over the San Diego Padres, the Mets now find themselves 10 games back of a wild card spot with 36 games to play. Now look, some of these wins over the last week or so have come against teams, we've talked about it, the paper tiger that is the Cleveland Guardians, catching the Pittsburgh Pirates at the right time. You know, they play the Atlanta Braves, they did drop 2 of 3. You know, now they've got the San Diego Padres, they're a good team on a roll. Yes, the Mets get a big victory here, but the schedule is going to get tougher over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And look, if they can come through this stretch playing better teams, as well as they have against some of the poor teams like the Guardians or teams that are just down bad like the Pittsburgh Pirates, whatever, if they can play good baseball against these teams that are lined up on their schedule, including this series with the Padres, then maybe I will start to buy in because, again, at that point, you're playing playoff teams. You're playing teams that are ahead of you. You're stockpiling even more wins. And at that point, maybe I can buy into the miraculous. But right here, right now, I still don't think that's going to be the case. And I don't want to be Debbie Downer. I don't want you guys to feel like I'm raining on your parade if you're you gotta believe, tried and true. Look, I believe. I'm watching these games. I'm having an absolute blast with the way the Mets are playing baseball because, like I've said over the last week or so on this show, there hasn't been enough of this quality of baseball. So I'm never going to throw back wins, and I'm never going to be upset that the Mets are piling them up, but I just need to see a little bit more to make sure that this is not just smoke and mirrors and vibes and all kinds of stuff, but I like what I am seeing. Let's talk quickly about this game because there are a few things that we need to highlight. I'll talk about Nolan McLean here right out of the gate. Now, he did not have his best stuff, but you look up and look, his defense picked him up in a major way, which we'll talk about in a second. But Nolan McLean didn't have his best stuff, and yet he stays in the game and guts it out. Yes, the defense was a big part of it, but he was able to settle in, and he's able to go 6 innings, and he's able to only give up the 1 run. And it doesn't look pretty when you're watching it at certain points, being a little too fine with pitches, a little bit of bad luck in the first inning with a little dink and dunk here off the bat, whatever. But anyway, he goes 6 innings, gives up 1 run. That's a quality start, and you're going to take that from your rookie starting pitcher as he is going along, as he is learning. The biggest thing here is that the Mets are rolling with their stars. Francisco Lindor is playing like Francisco Lindor, and the demise of his career greatly exaggerated. Bo Bichette is now on one of those heaters. Carson Bench is playing himself into the Rookie of the Year conversation in a major way. AJ Ewing had sort of hit the skids, and he had some really good at bats today. Not a ton of results, but it looks like he's coming out of this little funk that he's been in. And again, you're getting contributions from all over the team. Kodai Senga, who's looked electric as a closer, unavailable today in the narrowest of, or last night, I should say, in the narrowest of lead situations. They go to Daniel Duarte and Nate Lavender, and it's like, no big deal. Sewn up, easy peasy. Let's take a win. Let's walk away. And so it's been a really great, fun, exciting time. I wish I was in New York so I can get out to the ballpark for almost no money and see this team play, because right now this team is fun. That was the theme of all of the shows last week, because that's the kind of run they've been on, and that's going to be the theme here today. And again, I'm not going to be upset about it. I'm not going to throw these wins back. We should touch on a couple of things that have nothing to do with the Major League team very briefly. Couple call-ups through the minor league system. Elian Pena gets called up into High A, so he goes to Brooklyn. 18 years old, already young for the league that he was at, and now the Mets are really not rushing him, but testing him, and you love to see that. Emilian Pena and Billy Emick get called up to AAA from AA, so there's some movement there in the organization as the Mets trying to see what they've got with these guys. And in a corresponding move that does have to do with the Major League roster, Christopher Morel, who's been on an absolute tear in Syracuse, gets called up to the Mets, and I was at the guy that they got from the Guardians. I forget his name. Is it Gabriel Arias? Gabriel Arias. He gets designated for assignment, so he's out. Christopher Morel is back up with the Mets for the first time, back up in the major leagues. That's a guy who's bounced around with Chicago and Tampa and Miami and a bunch of places, but he's got pop, he's got talent, he's got ability. Looks like he's going to work into the first base rotation at the very minimum, providing a right-handed complement, I believe, to Jared Young, which we know that the Mets are kind of valuing there, because Jared Young should not really be playing against all lefties or really any tough lefty at all. So we'll see what happens there. Christopher Morel does have reverse splits, which means he hits better against righties than he does against lefties. So I don't know how this machination or this platoon will work, but there ain't no harm in trying to find a productive bat to fill out the 26-man roster. Now, that being said, we have to talk about Carson Bench, who had one of the most spectacular days defensively that you could possibly have, bailing out Nolan McLean in the first inning. I don't know if the Padres missed the scouting report. I don't know if the Padres didn't get a scouting report. I don't know if the Padres ignored a scouting report. Whatever the case may be, in the first inning, there's some bloop base hits like we talked about. There's runners on base. There's traffic. And they decide, after a little blooper, third base coach is going to test the arm of Carson Bench. We know that arm is a big one. He throws a strike to home, 99 point something miles per hour, and has the runner dead to rights at the plate. And then moments later, there is another base hit to right field. And the Padres decide that they are going to give it another go. And at that point, Carson Bench unleashes an even better throw than the one before it at 103.9 miles per hour. That is the fastest throw from the outfield this season across Major League Baseball. And it is the fifth fastest or fifth hardest thrown outfield assist since they have been tracking that in the StatCast era. So we know the arm is big, and he hoses a second guy in the first inning, which is absolutely unbelievable play. I mean, this guy is making crazy catches. He's making unbelievable contributions with the bat. He's worked himself into the Rookie of the Year conversation, like I said, in every way imaginable. And now when you look at what he's been able to do on defense, that's going to help you start to do these things that are never been done before or haven't been done in 30 years or hasn't seen something like this. You look at throwing out players on back-to-back plays. from the outfield, getting 2 outfield assists, cutting down runners at home. That's going to get national media attention. And I tweeted this out. Carson Bench had a bad month to start his major league career, and since then he has been excellent. We've talked about that on this show ad nauseum. But J.J. Weatherholt has had a really solid season from the beginning. Now, his numbers have tailed off lately. His WAR is going to be much higher because he's played Gold Glove defense at second base, but WAR sometimes can overrate things like second base defense, and so Carson Bench has been coming on. J.J. Weatherholt has been dipping down. The other major player, and for my money, the rookie of the year right now, is Sal Stewart. Now, Sal Stewart with Cincinnati, a little bit more of a one-dimensional player in terms of the offense over the defense, but this guy might hit 35 home runs. He might knock in 120, 125, maybe more RBIs. And if you look at those counting stats, the OPS, he might just run away with it because those are big, gaudy, sexy power numbers. But Carson Bench, as the total package between those two extremes, he might be the best rookie right now. And when you have a bad first month, and you're on a team that has been floundering and that is poor for most of the season, it's easy for what Bench is doing to get lost in the shuffle as far as national media is concerned. But when your team starts to go on a little bit of a run after selling off player after player, and your team gets Kodai Senga into the closer spot and he does really well, and now the national media starts to look, and your team calls up Jeffrey Yan and he's doing crazy stuff, and your team and the national media starts to look. And then all of a sudden, with more eyes watching you because your team is playing really well, then you have a game like he did last night where you do something spectacular, throwing out 2 runners in a game. National media starts to look. And now, when it comes time for voters are going to look at Carson Bench a little bit more closely because they're going to be shown, it's going to be fresher in their heads that he has been doing and the team has been doing some really good stuff. And so all of a sudden, he starts to become a part of the conversation. I think it's still a little too early to say that Carson Bench can win Rookie of the Year because I do think it's Sal Stewart's to lose. But if he can catch up to J.J. Weatherholt a little bit in terms of WAR, and playing defense like this is certainly going to help. His offensive numbers, I think, are going to be better than J.J. Weatherholt's because, again, Bench is on the way up. Weatherholt's been on the way down offensively, and he's either caught him or passed him in most categories already. And so if he can just prove to be a truly very valuable player in every aspect of the word, there's a chance that he can win this award. And we'll see, because he is certainly having a year good enough to deserve it. Meanwhile, baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. And you know what I do before I sit down to record this. I head on over to the Kalshi app and I look and see if we can find some good value, some fun, some interesting stuff that has to do with our New York Mets. And I'm going to keep this one really simple because I'd like to see the good times continuing to roll. If you go on the Kalshi app and you look at the New York Mets to win this game today against the San Diego Padres, a Mets win is trading at 49 cents a share, which means $100 will get you $200. And I think that's pretty good value right there. And like I said, more importantly than that, I want to see the good vibes continuing. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can trade into and out of your position for a limited time. Download the Kalshi app. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Now look, not only did Carson Bench have this amazing defensive game, but the Mets played tight when they needed to, and the Mets were able to convert 4 outs at home in the first 2 innings of this game. And that was the difference. Look, you win 2-1 and you get 4 outs at the plate. Some of that is fortunate because some of that is mistakes made by base runners or base coaches or whatever. But it wasn't just Carson Bench. Carson Bench throws out those first 2 at the plate in the first inning. And then you have a little bit less impressive, I suppose. Bases loaded, nobody out. A little comebacker hit to Nolan McLean. He throws home to Francisco Alvarez for the forced play. And it wasn't a good throw, but Alvarez able to get the ball, come back down, land on the bag, everything like that, whatever. But that's your third out at home. And then you've got A.J. Ewing on a base hit to left field. He comes up firing, and he gets his man at the plate. Now, a little bit closer than any of the bench plays, but that's 4 outs at home. And when you talk about run prevention, if you're the Mets and you're David Stearns and you've been preaching run prevention, there ain't no better example of run prevention being put on full display than getting 4 outs at home and winning a game 2-1. So you got to give credit where credit is due. And I don't know when the last time, somebody could look this up. Maybe I'll look it up for you guys and have it on tomorrow's show. But I don't know when the last time 4 outs were recorded at home in the same game, all by rookies. Because you got to remember, Nolan McLean, still a rookie. You got Nolan McLean getting the out at home, A.J. Ewing getting the out at home, Carson Bench getting 2 outs at home. 3 of them amazing outfield assists, of course, and then Nolan McLean's force out, which, nothing to write home about, but he was able to get the job done. So when you talk about run prevention was on full display for the New York Mets on Monday night. The last thing I want to talk about, I don't want to get into spilt milk. I don't want to get into what could have been. Not really, but we have to talk about it just a little bit because under interim manager Andy Green, with last night's win, the Mets are officially over 500. They're 1 game over 500 with Andy Green at the helm as compared to Carlos Mendoza. So we talked so much about it. I was here on June 1st for my first show. Carlos Mendoza was still the manager. A few weeks later, Carlos Mendoza was no longer the manager. We did a whole show about it, whatever. But I had long been advocating for the Mets to fire Carlos Mendoza. Now, I don't think, just to rehash some of the thoughts, that it was all Carlos Mendoza's fault. I don't think that firing the manager is some kind of magic button that changes everything. But I think that when you have a lame duck manager, which is what Mendoza was, who had a very unsuccessful year last season and they fell apart, which is what happened, who had several losing streaks of 7 games or more from the middle of last season to the middle of this season. I believe it was 4 losing streaks over 7 games. And then you watch him preside over a team that loses 12 games in a row in the month of April and bury their season, because where would the Mets be right now? We talk about this magical run being so unlikely because of how deeply the Mets are buried still. If the Mets would have found a way to win 3 of those games, 4 of those games, if the Mets would have found a way to get out of their own way at some point, we could be having a different conversation. So Carlos Mendoza seems like a really good guy. By all accounts, he's a great man. And I do not want to kick a man while he's down, and I do not want to dance on the grave of somebody's career, and I do not relish in anybody being fired no matter what. But despite the fact that it was not all his fault, despite the fact that it's not some magic button you press, yes, do teams get galvanized a bit when an interim manager comes in? Usually. But it doesn't mean that you're going to go on a Phillies run like the Phillies are doing with Don Mattingly. It doesn't mean you're going to go on a Red Sox run like the Red Sox have done after you fire Alex Cora. Now, look, could that have happened? Maybe. But I just think now that the Mets are over 500 with Andy Green, and who knows, this might go away. The Mets might lose more games than they win for the rest of the season, and this point might become moot. But I just think that when you are in a season where the expectations are so high and you start that year basically losing 12 games almost immediately out of the gate, and you can't find solutions, and you get buried, and you know that there's talent here, and there seems to be a leadership void on this team because You need leaders besides the players. I'm not talking about Lindor, who was hurt and couldn't be the leader that he normally is. I'm not talking about Soto, who is a star but may not be that rah-rah leader. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a manager being able to right the ship, hold guys accountable, keep guys engaged, let guys know, hey, we got to shake this thing. And it seemed like Carlos Mendoza was very poor at that. And I don't know what would have happened if they would have fired him in April or fired him in May or fired him at any point before they fired him. But what I do know is that bad teams get managers fired, and teams that underperform get managers fired. And the Mets had the easiest avenue to take, where they just could have said, look, Mendoza's in the last year of his deal. We hold an option for him for 2027. He didn't finish strong last year. He has not opened strong this year. He's a great guy. We thank him for the magical run in 2024, but we can't keep him around right now. We're just going to have to go in a different direction. If the Mets made that move sooner, forget about the 12-game losing streak. After the 12-game losing streak, the Mets continued to not be able to get out of their own way. And I just can't help but think, if the Mets would have made this move sooner, maybe they wouldn't. Look, do I still think they would have been a bad team? Yes. Do I still think they would have sold at the deadline because that's the prudent thing to do? Yes. But maybe some of what we're seeing now over the last 2 weeks, maybe some of that would have been a little earlier. And so maybe instead of hitting the low mark of, I don't know what they were at one point, 18 games under, 19 games under, I don't even know if it got to 20, but whatever it was, instead of hitting that low mark, maybe they hover around 13 games under. And you say, 13 games under, 18 games under, what's the difference? Well, right now, 10 games out of a wild card spot with 36 left to play, if they were 5 games better over the last 2 months, they might be 5 games out of a wild card with 36 to play. That's a big difference. Maybe they're 8 games out, which is less of a big dip. But you see where I'm going with this. I don't know. I don't think the Mets were going to make the playoffs with Andy Green selling at the deadline. I don't think so. But the thing is, we'll never know because they didn't do it. And they had this opportunity to do something that baseball teams do all the time. The Phillies did it. The Red Sox did it. Countless teams have done it countless times over and over and over again. Last year and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that. And they'll do it next year and they'll do it the year after that and the year after that. Bad baseball teams get managers fired. Teams that are underachieving, especially, get managers fired, especially when that underachieving is not, a bad 6 weeks, a bad 8 weeks. That underachieving is a bad first half in 2024, a bad second half in 2025, and a bad first half in 2026. So much more bad mixed in there. Mets had the chance to just let go of Mendoza and see what happens. They may have done it too late. But you know what? Maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't matter either way, like I said. Or maybe they do the impossible and they go on this miraculous run. Either way, I'm going to be watching every week, every day, every week. Well, yeah, I guess every week too. I'm going to be watching every day. And I'm going to be here with you every day. And I guess we'll find out together. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as we're sitting just over 4,000 subscribers, trying to get to 5,000 by the end of this season. And who knows? Maybe we'll do it. Maybe the Mets will go on a run. Maybe we can enjoy it together. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.